This is Dr. Jillian Hartley, and I'm doing an oral history for ANC's Histories today with Adron Poole. Adron, appreciate you being here. You have had an experience at technically MCCC, now ANC, that we're going to highlight a lot of different aspects of it. But before we get started, do I have your permission to record?
Most certainly.
Great. Okay, so can you tell us a little bit about when and where you were born?
I was born in Chicago, Illinois, 1963, Cook County Hospital. Lived only there for a year and a half before my mom and my father, they separated. My mom is originally from the South, a little community called Wabbaseka between Stuttgart and Pine Bluff. She decided to come back home with three boys. I was the youngest of the three. And I lived all of my childhood in the Wabbaseka community. Okay. Yeah.
So you came back with your mom, and so you live in that community. Were you around other family when you were
most
there?
Certainly. I have a huge family. My mom, her mom and dad got married at the age of 16. They had 22 kids.
Wow.
My mom is the 14th of 22 kids. So we had a huge family.
So when you were there, what high school did you go to?
I went to Wabbaseka High School.
Okay.
They called us Little Indiana U because we had a very, very good basketball program. We didn't have football. It was a small Class B school, but we excelled.
So you enjoyed basketball at a young age?
Most certainly.
There.
All of my childhood.
Well, can I ask what brought you to, before we talk about what brought you to the Blytheville area, can you talk a little bit more about your hometown? What was life like growing up?
Wabbaseka is a small community. I think the most that I remember the population ever being was 766 people. The majority of that community was my family. We grew up tightly knit. Principles that seem to be fading away right now. Family value. We've been able to hold on to that even at this current state in society. We value family time. We come together. We value our time together. My wife is always blown away at the fact that we can spend 3 days, 4 days together, and there's never any discord, arguments, anything of the negative. She says that is amazing because we know how important family and time is together. So I'm the third of 8 siblings. I'm the third oldest. My family regard me as the oldest. My oldest brother passed away 2 years ago, but I've always been the anchor to the family, you know. So we love just being together. We value the importance of it all. And in that community, I got aunts. I got 2 aunts who are still, one's 97, one's 95. My mom is the third oldest living now she'll be 82 in September. But we still have big family gatherings together, and it's awesome.
I love that. And your wife is right. That is not, that is something that's so valuable, but at the same time too, it's not as
prevalent as it used to be.
It's not as prevalent as it probably should be. Okay, so you do eventually come to Mississippi County Community College. So can you tell us a little bit about how you got to Mississippi County and why you decided to enroll in MCCC?
Well, really, when I came here, I was transitioning. I was currently married, going through a situation, and my story about coming here, it would take my mom and dad to confirm my story because, like I said, originally I'm from Chicago. I spent all of my summers, for the most part, in Chicago. And, of course, Blytheville is about 3 hours from Wabbaseka. Good place to stop, rest a minute, refuel, and get ready for the additional 6.5 hour drive. I would hate to stop in this community. Knew nothing about it, good or bad. But it was just something about it. I didn't want to stop here. And my parents would go like, what is your problem? I said, I don't know. But why we have to stop here? And they love to stop here. They love to stop here. But, I was always outvoted, so I had to do what everybody else did. So when I told my parents, I said, listen, I don't know why, but I'm relocating to Blytheville. And my mom was going like, you going where? I said, I'm going to Blytheville. She says, no, you're not. I said, yes, I am. She says, you hate Blytheville. I said, I know I said that, but I got to go. And I had been acquainted with Coach Tyer. He had recruited me earlier. We got quite a few athletes who come from Wabbaseka who played here. Stacy Walker, Leon Walker, Harris. Okay. Stacy Harris, Leon Harris. They both played here. Ernie Murray, former Arkansas Razorback basketball player. I had been recruited before they were. Okay. But I chose not to come at that particular time.
So can you backtrack a little bit? When did you meet Bill Tyer? So you met him
I was a graduate of Wabbaseka in 1981.
Okay.
And I had a brief encounter with him. I had Division I on my mind, so I really didn't buy into his invitation or whatever, his offer. So that was my brief encounter. And little did I know, almost 10 years down the road, we would connect.
Well, and he's somebody who, that would have been around the time he came to MCCC. And so a little bit, this is a question about Blytheville. So I want to talk about MCCC, but before we get to that, since you came through Blytheville a lot as a kid,
yeah,
and then of course you moved there, can you talk a little bit about what it looked like to you in that early 80s, mid 80s? Just what was Blytheville like as a community?
Well, really, I had never seen flatland like I see. I mean, because when you're from the southeast area of Arkansas, and we generally traveled west, for the most part. Rarely did we come south other than going back. And it was just interstate travel, so we're just passing through, So I really didn't get in an opportunity to see what the inner city of Blytheville was like. But it just looked like a lot of farmland. Agriculture is all I can relate to in the early 80s and so forth. Passing through and moving on, especially with the way I felt about it.
Yeah.
So.
And the land is very flat.
Yes, it is.
It is. So when you first went to Mississippi County Community College, can you tell me what it looked like? What was the campus like? What was life like then?
Well, strangely enough, it looked like the environment. It looked like a big old greenhouse. When I first looked at it, it reflected the area. This was agriculture area, and to me, the facilities, they reflected that. Is what it looked like. But it was beautiful because I had never seen a facility constructed like that. Being able to see the sun rays coming through the building, the sunlight projecting through as it was, but it was a beautiful structure.
Well, and it is built that way for the sun. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because of the solar panel project, and I think that's a good segue into my next question, which is, what role did you play in the Sun's sports team? This is, of course, when we kind of come back to Bill Tyer too.
Right. Well, you know what? When I first moved here, I did not come here to be a participant with the Suns program. I don't know if you remember or heard anybody talk about it, but right there across from Wilson Funeral Home used to be a 7-Eleven. And that's where I met Coach Tyer for the second time. I pulled into town, and I pulled into a 7-Eleven right there at the corner of McHaney and Division. I'm walking in, and he happened to be coming out. And we kind of looked at each other. And, of course, I'm a people person. I don't mind communicating. And he is, too, in a lot of ways. I looked at him. He looked at me. And he goes like, don't I know you? And I'm looking like. And he said, Adron Poole from Wabbaseka. And I go like, okay. And then I went like, Coach Tyer. Because he was that. him and Bobby Crimmins, who coached at Georgia Tech back in the day, were the only two coaches I knew that were white-headed like that. So you couldn't forget him, I mean, because it looked so natural and normal for him. And that's how we got acquainted. And he asked me, he said, what are you doing here? I said, I just got here. He says, what are you doing? I said, I'm not sure. He says, where are you staying? I said, I'm not sure. He says, where are you working at? I'm not sure. I just knew I was supposed to be here. And he said, I tell you what. He said, if you help me, I'll help you. And that's how we got acquainted. He needed somebody to be a watchman over the athletic program. The guys were living in a trailer on David Lane. And he says, I need somebody that's mature. He said, I'll give you a place to stay. And that worked for me. And we went from a place to stay to me being involved with the program. I enrolled in school, and that's how it all began. I mean, just that easy.
So what was so what year would this have been around?
This was 1990.
Okay, 1990. So what was the program? What did it look like then? What were the different sports and activities available?
Back then, of course, if you know anything about MCCC, they were a prominent program. I mean, among the best in the state. Coach Tyer had really built a strong program that was recognizable across the nation. I mean, when it comes to junior college basketball programs. That particular year, the boys and the girls both had very strong programs. They had successful programs, and we were on the map when it comes to athletics. And it was a culture that you came in, it was a winning culture. It was one that was respected among the tops among the junior college ranks, and you were proud to be. Once I got in, I was going like, man, I knew they had a good program, but I didn't know it was this prominent.
Wow. Did you find too that were there people who lived on the air base at the time who played? Or was there kind of because the air base was still open then, correct?
Yes.
So was that kind of a feeder as well?
Well, you know what? The beauty of it is that all the players, for the most part, were local.
Okay.
They were from the tri-state area, and I could just name names. Local guys, Paul Fowler, who currently works at Blytheville High School. He was a player. Fred Scales from Osceola. Eric McAdory from Osceola. We had Cassandra Baker from Osceola for the girls program. Another young lady, I'm struggling to remember her name, was from Blytheville. I mean, we had local guys from Travis Day. He was from around Malden, Missouri.
Okay.
That's where Travis was from. And we had local guys from Memphis. 3 or 4 local guys. We had 3 guys from Carruthersville, Kenny Bohannon, Fred Smith. These guys were great ball players. So we had local guys from the community. So we had support. We had Christy Gregg from Manila. Laura Mooney, I think she was from Monette. We had a young lady was from Tyranza. Girls from Parkins. They were all just from right here in the area. A couple of Gosnell girls. That it was truly Mississippi County and surrounding areas then as well as it is now.
Well, and Adron, to be able to remember all their names, that's so amazing. It shows what kind of impact they had. Mm-hmm. So as far as like the school experience at MCCC, you enrolled as a student. As far as a student goes, are there any memories from just being a student? And because education has changed so much since that time period. Mm-hmm. So are there any reflections on some of the changes and things that from then?
Yeah, it's been a major change. It really has been, because the culture is totally different. I always reflect back to my beginnings here, because we're talking about the athletics, but I had pillars who are anchors and very dear and special to me, always will be. I share it in my testimony everywhere I go about people like Mr. Max Hartley and his wife. These were Booster Club members of the Sons program. You had Mr. Wayne Widener, who was the postmaster here.
Okay.
I could talk forever about him because when the program closed down, he helped me transition into the employment ranks, gave me a job as a mail carrier. I had taken the civil service exam, and he asked me one day, he came over to the trailer, he says, "What are your plans now that the program has closed?" I said, "You know what, I'm in prayer about that." And that's a long story, but those are the things that happened. Galen Rogers, who was president at First National Bank at that particular time, now Southern Bank Corp. Mr. Mike Huffman, who was at Farmers Bank. I could go on, Jerry Lynn, Mr. Jerry Lynn at Jerry Lynn Donuts.
Yeah.
All these people were Booster Club members. Currently, Miss June, I'm sorry,
No, it's
Miss
okay.
June Walters, and I just know him as Dago. All these people, Mr. Hugh Ashmore and his wife, I never will forget them. All these people were part of the program, and they became instrumental in my life. And it was where the culture was different. The school, the atmosphere of the school, the student body transitioning throughout the building, the teachers standing at the doorways waiting on them to come in and out. And I can go on with Mr. Miles Jeffords and Cecil Holyfield and Dr. Moore. Wow, it's just so many. Danita, is it Danita?
She would have been Danita Jones.
Back
Danita
then.
Hicks today.
Yes, I
so
mean, it was
Yeah.
beautiful because people really interacted, they communicated, you developed person-to-person relationships. It was special.
Well, and you moved. This sort of is a testament to the community coming together too, to make sure that as the program was ending, that there was a place for people. So you go from there to being a mail carrier. How long did you work for the post office, if you don't mind me asking?
I worked for the post office 9 months.
Okay.
And Mr. Widener, very dear to me, will always be special to me. He called me in one day. He said, I said, "Am I in trouble?" He said, "No." He says, "I want you to know you're doing an exceptional job." He says, "I want you to have a full-time job." Well, when he hired me as a mail carrier, it was part-time because they had a freeze on permanent hiring. And he says, "I want you to have a full-time job." He said, "The only problem is you'd have to go to Memphis." And I was going like, "Memphis? I can't go to Memphis." He says, "Why not?" I told him exactly. I said, "I know the Lord got me in Blytheville." And he was, he wasn't a Christian man at that time. He is now. And we talk about it all the time. He kind of looked at me strange. He said, "Okay." He says, "Have you ever heard of Nucor?" I said, "Yes." He said, "How would you like to work in Nucor?" I said, "Sure." 2 weeks later, guess what?
You were.
I was working at Nucor.
Well, and if we can, there's something that, a couple of things before we kind of move into that transition that the college and the community went through in the early 90s. Do you have any other thoughts about the sports era at NCCC and how it came to an end? Because, the state did start funding, actually kind of ended the funding for sports, which did play a role in the decision for many colleges to kind of abandon sports. So looking just back on the legacy of sports at MCCC, what are some of the things that stand out to you about the importance of having those programs, and just any final thoughts you have about the sports era?
Well, when I look back at it, it was like the glue that brought everything together. You know what I mean? Because when you think of sports, regardless of what everybody who was a part of MCCC's agenda was, sports put us all in one place. Whether you were academically focused as an instructor or whether you were focused from an administrative role or whatever, when we get through dealing with our departmental aspects, the athletics brought us to one common place. It was about one common purpose. It was about MCCC and the Mississippi County Community College Sons. It was about us, and that's what I loved about it. We had one agenda. In spite of what differences we may have had otherwise, the only thing that mattered was we were the best at being who we were as the Suns program. And that's what I love so much about sports. It has a way of unifying us and bringing us together with one mindset and one objective. The national championship game last night, it was all about two teams, Notre Dame and Ohio State. And regardless of race, color, creed, religious background, or whatever, that was irrelevant. It's about us, and that's what I loved about the program so much. It was a way of unifying us, and I hated that it came to a closure because nothing seems to bring people together like athletics does, and it created relationships. I mean, here I am now. I'm almost 62 years old. I've been here 34 years, and that program united me with some people that I never forget. Coach Tyer, I never forget Coach Tyer. That man will always be dear and special to my heart because he opened the door. Yeah. And if I may say, the Lord used him to open the door. And look at me now.
Well, and I've known Bill Tyer for 30 years, I think now. And he's one of the people I can honestly say he's got a good teacher's heart. Because when I did an interview with him, I asked him, he was like, how he doesn't, I know he defines himself as a coach partly, but he sees himself, I think, more as a teacher. And coaching gives him an outlet to do that. Right. But it goes so in so many different ways in his life.
I agree. And he is a teacher because even from the basketball perspective, he was such a teacher. Yeah. And he was so adamant about you doing it the right way. I mean, there were times up the line on the defense. We spent a whole practice until you got it right. He didn't care what other element we might need to address. He didn't believe in going to B when A was not done, so he stayed with it. We didn't like it. Sometimes it's like he had dual personalities. I mean, we would, and when you look back on it, it's fun, but he was so adamant about being the best, doing it the way it's supposed to be done. And you saw it in the finished product. His teams were good. They were disciplined. They were great.
Well, Adron, we're going to shift gears a little bit because one of the things that you were here for was when it was announced that Eaker Air Force Base was going to be closing. And so can you just reflect a little bit about that? How did that impact anything you might know about the college, the community, and just give us some of your reflections about it?
Well, ironically, I'm probably not the one that can really tell you the true magnitude of that because my experience here has been such short-lived with me coming here. I did have the opportunity as a mail carrier, I'm carrying mail on the base, and to watch the transitioning, to see people starting to uproot and to leave and change, seeing things being going through the closure of shutting certain departments and areas down. I think the reason I really couldn't say what the impact was because not only were we dealing with the base closing, but we were also celebrating Nucor coming. So it kind of helped soften the blow from the economic perspective, that we had a lifeline because the base, for the most part, to my understanding, was the lifeline of this community, and Nucor is kind of like a saving grace in a sense of speaking, So to hear people talk about the base, I heard a lot of great things that happened with the base and how it impacted this area in a great way. So I think what could have been detrimental didn't hit us as hard as it probably could have if we didn't have the economic transition that we had.
The steel coming in. Yeah. But I will say, as a mail carrier, getting to see sort of, because, the base closing in the end of the Cold War, it's, so you got to see people kind of packing up.
Yeah.
But it wasn't necessarily, but it was because the dangers or the perceived dangers were not as much of a threat now because the Soviet Union.
Right.
So I don't know if what it would have been like to watch people packing up, but also kind of have a sense of well, maybe we're not all going to be, bombed with nuclear weapons tomorrow, like all the 80s movies.
Right. Well, you know what? The base to me, I already had an experience of what that was like because my father was the fire chief of the Pine Bluff Arsenal Fire Department, a governmental base there. So I already knew what those kind of facilities look like, and how they operate and so forth. So there's a whole lot of similarity there. But it did, let you know that we were in a safer zone now because they were shutting down certain facilities and whatever. So the threat didn't seem as severe as it had been in the 60s and late 50s that we were enduring.
Well, Adron, you've talked a little bit about your life after you left MCCC, but I want to mention that you eventually make your way back to what is now Arkansas Northeastern College, formerly MCCC. So you eventually come back. So can you tell me what was it like to come back and what brought you back to the campus, this time as an employee and a teacher?
Well, to watch MCCC, currently ANC, to watch how it evolved, I mean, going from that little building that I said looked like a greenhouse to seeing it come to full fruition, how it's developed, and now it is just a sight to behold because when I came, Dr. Sullins was the president, and I think Robin Myers was next in line after him, and then Dr. Shimwell came on, and now we're dealing with Dr. Chris Hagel as president. Just watching the development, I mean, to see the vision come to full existence, you know what I mean? It's one thing to talk about what you like to see, but to actually see it. I had the opportunity driving up and down Division Street to see every change that has come to its full manifestation now, and it is beautiful. How I became, again, an employee at MCCC is amazing in itself. I was currently working as a basketball coach and PE teacher at KIPP School. And when COVID hit, we stopped the basketball program there. We decided not to have athletics because of COVID. And I took over the operations director for them, making sure facilities and everything were operating as they should or whatever. And the CHIME program that was short-lived at the college, I was asked if I would be interested in working in that capacity and helping oversee it. So that's how I wound up coming back. When that faltered, then the county decided that they wanted to partnership with all these industries and create Arkansas Steelmaking Boot Camp. Well, having been a former employee at Nucor for 15 years, with my background there and having had a degree, also allowed me the opportunity to be an instructor for the Arkansas Steelmaking Boot Camp. So I've had the best of all you could ask for since I've been in Mississippi County.
Well, and you got to see the steel industry come in.
Right.
And now you're essentially helping to meet the demands.
Exactly.
So can you tell us just a little bit about you're looking at we're looking at close to 35 plus years now from when places like Nucor came to today. So I'm thinking about when you said you came through and it looked like just farmland. So
right.
Can you speak a little bit about the transition to Mississippi County that you've seen since you've moved to Blytheville?
Well, I mean, it is amazing to be able to see how what just looked like open land for just agriculture means has now become the foundational grounds by which the whole world now is being fed through. I mean, because we know the impact of the steel industry, and to know that now I think we're like the number one steel making industry in the U.S., it's mind-blowing. And to have had an intricate role in what has transpired with it. I mean, even now the development on the south end of the county, for the most part, the greatest impact was in the Blytheville area, the north end of the county, and now you see it's just trickling further and further. The county as a whole is beginning to experience the developmental impact of it all. So I'm just glad to know, because you got to attribute a lot of that to the farmers who are willing. You can't build these industries without having the space to do it in. They saw the need in order to keep the county relevant and moving forward. So, I mean, it has been beautiful to see the transition, you know.
Well, now you're also teaching.
Most certainly.
When you, looking back at your experience as a student, just high school, even early college, when you were, initially a student at MCCC, to teaching practices today, can you speak a little bit to how teaching practices and standards have evolved? Because, one of the things you probably didn't have a lot of back in 1990 was technology in the classroom. So can you speak, and you're also, I want to mention, in the amazing Allied Tech state-of-the-art building.
Oh, certainly.
Yeah. So can you just give us some insight into how practices have changed and some of your teaching today?
Well, you know what? I'm grateful in that I did come up in the era that we didn't have all this technology, because it allows you to incorporate the technical aspect as well as the personal aspect. I think one of the biggest negatives to me about technology is it takes the person-to-person relationship, because now me and you could communicate and never have to. I can communicate with you on a daily basis and never know what you look like if we choose to, But it's a huge difference. I think teaching for me in this capacity is easy because of the era that I came from, and the hardest part was adapting to technology, because I was not very tech savvy, and I'm still learning how to be. But at the same time, I learned people, they really do appreciate the personal approach. I use that a lot in my teaching. So it's been easy for me in a sense, not as far as incorporating the knowledge base, because to me, that's just how you relate to people, taking what you know about the subject or whatever, and just make it become personable. And to me, that makes it easier for people to understand. Now, the technical things, these young people, they're born tech ready now, so you don't even have to teach them that element. But the part that me and you grew up with, the social, personal association, to me, that's more what you have to learn to incorporate with them than you do the technical aspect.
Well, and I think, too, it's probably not a challenge to teach students why the steel industry is important and why what you're teaching them is important. Because would you agree, and could you expand upon how important steel is now to the region? You talked about how it did come in when the base was closing, which many people saw as like the saving grace.
Right.
So what do you think is going to happen to the county in the next 10, 20 years? Obviously, number one steel producer now. Do you think that's going to continue? And will that just any thoughts from your research and from the classroom that you'd like to share about the steel industry and its future?
Well, I think it will continue, because you think about the advancement and development and technology and even space and all these kind of things. I mean, the new development in the automobile industry, where now they're making vehicles that they don't look like vehicles. They taking more of a space age approach to things or whatever. So all these things are ways that the steel industry are playing a major role and impact. I mean, infrastructure, new design and developments in cities and buildings and things of that nature. So I see the future for it just continuing to grow even more and more. The thing that I share with the young people is that it is the market of interest today. That's where industrialized training is where it's at, 4-year degrees. They are important. Don't misunderstand me, because where would we be if we didn't have people who were getting degrees in science and degrees in math and all these kind of things. But the industrialized industry, that's where it is right now. This is the moment for it right now. I can't say that it'll be that way 40 years from now, but right now this is where it's at. And I'm glad to be able to play a part, and helping them understand. I tell my class all the time, I migrated here for an opportunity.
Yeah.
Now they get to stay in mama's house, mom and daddy's house, never leave the bedrooms, and have an opportunity to make $100,000 a year right there, and never leave their family. I have to go back to enjoy my family for the most part, but it's all right here, and it's continued to get better and better and greater and greater.
In the land of steel.
Yeah.
So this is something you kind of touched upon, but when you look at the future of community colleges, when you first were a student, there was a standard of almost pretty much most people who were coming to college were trying to get at least their basics or transfer degree from MCCC to then go to a bachelor's degree. So do you see the future of community colleges becoming more skill-based and where the 4-year degree is not necessarily the standard, at least for a time? Because, and like I said, you've already kind of touched upon that in your program, but when it comes to community colleges, what do you think the future is going to look like for community colleges? Because community colleges have already developed a lot of training programs that some universities have not. So where do you see us moving into the future, not just ANC, but community colleges in general?
That's kind of a hard question for me, because when you look at it as a whole, we've been blessed here that we are able to focus in areas that a lot of community colleges don't have. They don't have the luxury of doing. And I'll give you a good example. With the Arkansas Steelmaking Boot Camp program and the Steel Tech program that we have here, we've tried to incorporate all of the surrounding colleges to partner with us to push this program, to kind of get them in on it, because employment for these industries, they don't just come from Mississippi County alone. They come from all the surrounding areas. So ASU, Newport, and all these other community colleges, they could play a very intricate role in the development of it, but it's been a slow progress to get them involved with the programs. And I think right now this is the lifeline of community colleges. We're talking about athletics. This is just my personal opinion, I think the athletic programs are needed, because you can get pretty much the academic, you can pretty much get it anywhere you want to get it now, online, without ever stepping on a college campus. But to me, the student body on the campus, to me, that's what's going to be the saving grace, finding a way to keep the student body on the campus. And athletics play a major role in that.
And, that's been one of the major challenges, especially since COVID, for so many institutions.
Right.
Just trying to rebuild a campus culture.
Exactly.
So from looking at your experience, are there any sort of values or traditions that you really could impart on the younger generations for them to consider as they move forward? And when I ask this question, I encourage people to think about, what would you tell your 20-year-old self from what you've learned now and all of your experiences? What would you tell a younger person who's just sort of starting off and thinking about career and their path forward?
Well, I grew up, my parents, they were adamant about us being people of integrity. They were adamant about us being true to your word. My father always taught us that you can accomplish whatever you want to. Make sure it's realistic. Know that it's not going to happen overnight. There's steps in the process. That's been easy for me to accept because I watched him do it. My father went from being a farmer to being one of the first African Americans to be a fire chief in a governmental facility on a high school education. And he always told us that, remember that people are watching you and that you need them more than you think you do. You don't have to always be personable with everybody, but you need to be respectful to everybody. You don't have to always agree with everybody, but you have to also remember that everybody's entitled to an opinion, and they all have a view. I think one thing that I would tell young people is know what you want to accomplish in life. Be true to yourself. Know your weaknesses more so than you know your strengths, because it's not what you do well that's going to stop you from accomplishing. It's the thing that you ignore about yourself that you don't do well. Reflect on them more than you do your strengths, because that's going to be the things that may hold you up, because most people, they don't want to accept the reality about themselves. I think the thing that's helped me is I've learned to appreciate my shortcomings as much as I have my successes. What I do wrong, I've learned from them to make sure that I use that as a stepping stone to be better. To know that it's obtainable. That's what I teach my children. My father taught it to my mom and dad taught it to us. I teach it to my kids. I've seen the success in it with my children, and now we're trying to teach it to our grandchildren. So opportunity is there. It's not going to be handed to you. You're going to have to work for it. And when people see you working for it, guess what they're willing to do? They're willing to help you get there. And I say that because that happened to me. I never forget what Mr. Widener said to me. And my daddy told me that. He said, people watch you. One of the first things that Mr. Widener said to me before he gave me that job at the post office, he said, Adron, I've been watching you. I never forget that. He said, I watch you mop the gym floor during the game, and you're supposed to be an assistant coach, and you did it as though it didn't matter that you were doing it. And when he said that, what my dad said just began to just radiate in my thinking process. I said, man, my daddy said that. And it's so true. And it's true today. When people watch you striving to be your best self, to be a helping hand, to help push things forward, guess what they want to do? They want to partner with you. They want to aid and assist you. I've had that happen to me. And now that I'm at ANC, that's my goal every day. I get to share with other young people what other people share with me. I get to do for them what other people did for me. You're not going to build a long-lasting relationship with everybody you do that with. That's not important. Some people you do that with just to help take us to the next 10 years, the next 20 years, because all of us play an intricate role in that. So.
Well, Adron Poole, this is an amazing way to I think, conclude the interview. It's advice that I think could help not only young people, but all people, any age. Is there anything else that you want to share before we sign off?
I just want to go on record because, there are a lot of people that, Blytheville gets a bad rap, and I take it personal. Personally, I really do, because I share with people that this has been my land of milk and honey. There's nothing I have not desired or want to do or accomplish that I hadn't been able to achieve here. And it's a beautiful community. I always say I believe the glass is half full. It's not half empty. I always take an optimistic point of view. I don't like being pessimistic. Yeah, there are issues, there are problems, but that's everywhere, and that's in everything. You just have to decide which direction you want to focus in. You want to work to move it to a progressive, positive position or state, or do you want to take it down to a further degrading level of that's not achievable or good for anybody, you know. So I leave on record, we have a great community. We have a great county. We got great things going on. And I'm not just saying that, you know, to just to say something, but I've been a beneficiary of it. So.
Well, I so appreciate you taking the time, Adron, today for this inspiring history, you know, and leaving us on such a high note, because I think that it's just something that, you know, can benefit so many people, and also recognizing the importance of education and self-growth, self-awareness, and the constant effort to continue to make the best out of our lives while we have time.
Well, I appreciate it. It's been fun. I hope our mission was accomplished.
I think it was. Thanks.
I've enjoyed it.